In the coldest winter Chicago had seen in decades, two souls passed each other on opposite trajectories, one falling from grace, one already fallen. The wind didn't care which was which. There are moments when a life splits in two before and after separated by a single choice. For some, it's the decision to walk past suffering. For others, it's the courage to stop. They say the higher you climb, the colder it gets. But what they don't tell you is how deafening the silence becomes. How the view from glass towers reveals everything except what matters. That night, as snow erased footprints, almost as quickly as they formed, a man who had forgotten himself encountered a woman who couldn't afford to. Neither knew that survival sometimes wears the disguise of a stranger's coat, or that redemption often begins with a simple question. What happens when we stop walking past each other? Michael Reynolds stood alone on the rooftop terrace of the glass-paneled building, bearing his company name, Rescare Tech. Below him, Chicago's skyline glittered beneath a wash of icy winter air and streetlights. The city looked polished, curated, just like his life had become. Behind closed glass doors, a corporate fundraiser buzzed with warmth and flattery. Investors, board members, hollow smiles, and expensive wine. He had slipped away from his own celebration without explanation. No one followed. They rarely did these days. Michael tugged at his cuffs, adjusting the tailored sleeves of his wool overcoat, fingers stiff from the biting December wind. Everything he wore tonight carried a price tag most people wouldn't say aloud. His watch alone could pay off someone's mortgage. His shoes could fund a semester at a state college. And yet here he was, standing alone in the sharp wind, trying to remember what any of it meant. A voice echoed in his memory, one he hadn't heard aloud in 7 years. The higher you climb, Michael, the colder it gets. Don't forget to bring a coat that fits your soul. Catherine had always said things like that with that crooked smile, as if she knew he'd ignore the advice anyway. And he had. He'd climbed higher and higher until her absence felt like just another luxury loss. Michael blinked against the wind. At 58, he had achieved everything he'd set out to accomplish after leaving medicine. Rescare Tech was now valued at $9 billion. Their diagnostic AI platform was being implemented in hospitals across the country. But tonight, he didn't want to go back to the fundraiser. He didn't want to go home to his empty penthouse either. Instead, he walked to the elevator past the valet, who gave him a puzzled glance through the revolving doors and out into the winter night. He ignored the black town car idling at the curb driver, waiting heat on. Michael shoved his hands in his pockets and turned left, the wind punching against his collar. His breath trailed behind him in pale wisps. No direction, just the need to move. Chicago was quieter than usual. Cold tends to do that. Tonight it pulled no punches. The temperature had dropped to 12 degrees, and the weatherman had warned of snow before midnight. Michael passed closed storefronts and flickering street lamps, the hum of traffic muffled by snow already forming thin veils on the sidewalk. 20 years as a surgeon at Mercy Hospital. 20 years of standing over open bodies, making life and death decisions with steady hands. Then Catherine's diagnosis came too late. Stage 4, inoperable. By the time they found it, the cancer had already spread throughout her lymphatic system. If we'd only caught it sooner, the oncologist had said. Those words haunted Michael for years before becoming the foundation of Rescare Tech, a diagnostic platform that could identify patterns human doctors might miss. A system that never got tired, never overlooked a detail. A faint trail of violin music filtered from a nearby cafe before being swallowed by the night. Then he saw her. It was a flicker at first, a shape beneath the yellowish light of a Lake Street bus stop. Huddled and still. He would have walked past if not for a gust of wind that lifted the edge of a thin hospital scrub jacket. Michael stopped, looked again. A woman, not quite asleep, curled tightly against one end of the bench, her arms wrapped around a small bundle, a child. They were layered in mismatched clothing, scrubs, a hoodie, a child's puffy coat that looked 2 sizes too small. The woman's head rested against the bench railing, her skin pale lashes fluttering. The girl beside her stirred, pressing closer into the woman's side, tiny fingers peeking from frayed gloves. Something in Michael seized. It was like a thread in his chest pulled taut. He stepped forward slowly, quietly. Not out of fear, just the feeling that this moment wasn't meant to be interrupted. The woman's eyes opened, barely dull but aware. She looked at him with a flash of confusion but said nothing. "I'm not here to bother you," Michael said, voice low. It's freezing out." She blinked once, twice. Her expression didn't change. "I have a coat," he added. "It's warm. Take it, please." He slid it from his shoulders and stepped forward, careful not to make sudden moves. She didn't speak, didn't protest, just watched him as he draped the heavy fabric over both her and the girl. The child sighed softly in her sleep, curling deeper into the warmth. Michael stepped back. A silence stretched between them. Snow drifted in slow spirals, catching the glow of the street lamp. He noticed the blue fabric beneath her open jacket. "You're a nurse," he asked gently, nodding at her scrubs. She nodded once, her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "Used to be." That was all. He could have asked 100 things. "Where's your home? What happened? Why here? Why now?" But he didn't. Michael's medical training kicked in. He crouched down, maintaining a respectful distance. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward the child. The woman tensed but gave a slight nod. With practiced precision, he gently touched the girl's forehead, then examined her fingertips. Mild hypothermia setting in, he noted. From his pants pocket, he pulled out a pair of hand warmers, a habit from his days of winter hospital shifts. "Activate these and put them in her mittens," he instructed softly. "They'll help raise her core temperature." The woman's eyes widened slightly at his medical knowledge. He only said, "There's a diner down on Lake Street. Wilson's. Open all night. They won't ask questions. Tell them Michael sent you. They'll give you something hot." She looked away toward the street. "I'm not here to fix anything," he added. "Just, you shouldn't be out here tonight." The woman's gaze returned to him sharper now. Not angry, just cautious, measured, like she'd heard promises before and found them all hollow. He nodded once and turned, walking away into the dark. No name, no contact, no card. Just his coat and a weight in his chest he hadn't felt in years. He didn't look back. He didn't sleep that night either. His penthouse was warm, impeccable, and silent. He sat by the fireplace but didn't light it. Instead, he stared out the window, watching the snow thicken over the city. His phone buzzed twice with unread emails. A pitch deck, a partnership memo, a dinner invite. He didn't open any of them. Instead, he saw the bench, the frayed gloves, the girl's small hand curled into her mother's ribs. He told himself it was nothing, that he'd done a decent thing, and that was enough. But sometime before dawn, Michael pulled a legal pad from the drawer in his study and wrote down 5 words. "Find the nurse from last night." He underlined it twice. The cold always woke Sarah first. Even before her eyes opened, her body registered it, the ache in her fingers, the stiffness in her back, the sharp bite in her lungs. But this morning something was different. The cold was duller, muted. She slowly lifted her head from the backrest of the bus stop bench, disoriented. Then she saw it, a coat. Thick, heavy wool, high-end, draped over her and Emma like a blanket. Not theirs, not from the donation bin. This was real. She blinked fast, her breath curling in front of her lips. "Mom," Emma's voice groggy and muffled. "I'm here, baby," Sarah whispered, tucking the coat more tightly around her daughter's shoulders. "You're okay." Emma shifted slightly in her sleep, cheeks flushed from the cold but no longer shaking. Sarah watched her for a long moment, then looked around. No one, only snow falling soft against the pavement, no footprints nearby except her own from the night before. She sat there silently, tension rising in her chest. A coat like this wasn't left by chance. She remembered someone, tall, dark coat, voice like calm thunder. A man, kind eyes. Maybe it was all fog now. She didn't remember what he said. Just the tone, gentle, careful. A stranger who didn't ask questions. Sarah slowly stood and stretched, every joint protesting. Her back screamed from another night on a bench. She had been a pediatric nurse for 15 years at Lakeside Hospital, specialized in oncology, held the hands of children fighting battles no child should have to fight, translated medical jargon for terrified parents, stayed late to sing lullabies to patients whose parents couldn't be there. Now she walked to the corner convenience store where the clerk sometimes let her use the bathroom. The same clerk watched her now through the glass but said nothing as she passed. Inside the tiny restroom, Sarah locked the door behind her and stared into the mirror. Pale skin, chapped lips, sunken cheeks, hair twisted into a makeshift bun with a pen she found 2 days ago. She ran water over her hands, then cupped some to splash her face. The faucet groaned. The water was freezing. She dried off with her sleeves and whispered to her reflection, "We're okay. We're okay today." Emma waited, curled up on the bench, nose buried into the lining of the stranger's coat. Sarah hesitated as she reached to lift it off the child's body. The tag was still inside. Barrow Reeves, London. It didn't belong here. Sarah folded it neatly and held it for a moment before laying it back over her daughter's lap. She couldn't keep it, but she couldn't give it back either. A diner up the block opened early for the morning crowd. Sarah hesitated outside the fogged-up glass window, glancing at the open sign blinking red. She didn't plan to go in, just wanted the warmth for a second. Then a waitress opened the door. "You, Sarah?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. Sarah froze. "Yes." The woman smiled. "Guy came in last night, said if a woman named Sarah showed up with a kid, we should give her a hot breakfast. Paid in advance." "What?" Her voice cracked. "Who?" "Didn't say, just left this." She handed over a small business card. No logo, just a name. Michael. Sarah stared at the card like it might catch fire. "You want the booth by the heater?" the waitress asked kindly. She nodded, still stunned. "Yes, thank you." Inside, the warmth hit her like a blanket. She took off her hoodie, sat across from Emma, who now blinked sleepily at the smell of bacon. A plate arrived minutes later. Eggs, toast, hot chocolate. Emma smiled. "Did someone make this for us?" "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah said softly. "They did." She didn't eat right away. She watched her daughter devour her breakfast like it was Christmas morning, cheeks, pink eyes bright. Then she reached for a piece of toast with shaky hands. It had been days since they'd had something hot that wasn't from a soup line. But her mind wasn't on the food. It was on the man. Michael. He hadn't left a number, no message, no conditions, just warmth. And that haunted her more than if he'd asked for anything in return. Because men always asked for something. She forced the thought away. Yeah, but after breakfast, Sarah returned the coat to the bottom of her rolling duffel and made her way to the Hope Community Center, where she sometimes helped sort medical supplies. It wasn't a job, but the nurse coordinator Martha let her pitch in for a few hours and slip some gloves or hand warmers when supplies allowed. The center buzzed with quiet energy. Clipboards, coffee, paperwork. She blended in quickly, grateful to feel useful again. "Sarah," Martha called gently. "You got a minute?" Sarah wiped her hands and stepped into Martha's tiny office. "Someone asked about you," Martha said carefully. Sarah stiffened. "Who?" "Tall guy. Looked like he stepped out of a GQ ad." Sarah's heart stumbled. "He just asked if you were okay. Didn't push. Left right after. I didn't say anything, just nodded." Sarah didn't respond. Martha leaned forward. "You know him." "I don't," Sarah said too quickly. Martha raised an eyebrow. "That's not a bad thing. Just be careful, that's all." Sarah nodded, trying to smile, but her mind raced. He was looking for her. Why? She walked home, if you could call it that, to the corner of 7th and Grant, where a narrow alley sheltered a few cardboard barriers from the wind. She'd memorized patrol schedules, made friends with a retired janitor who shared thermoses of tea. It wasn't safe, but it was the safest she could manage. Emma was asleep again, nestled into a sleeping bag a shelter had given them last month. Sarah leaned against the alley wall and closed her eyes, listening to the hum of the city. Michael. Just a name. A stranger who had seen too much and said too little. She told herself it didn't matter that his help had already passed, that they'd take the coat, the meal, and nothing else. But somewhere deep in her chest, something stirred. Not hope, not yet. Just the echo of warmth and the smallest flicker of curiosity she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. Who leaves kindness like breadcrumbs and disappears? Bah! Michael stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, coffee untouched on the counter behind him. The city below was waking up, its skyline brushed with morning light and last night's frost clinging to rooftops. Somewhere out there she was waking too, if she'd slept at all. He hadn't planned to look for her again. He told himself that one kind gesture, walk away, feel like a human for 5 minutes. But the image kept looping in his mind. The nurse huddled on a bench in the bitter cold, her daughter clinging to her side like a second heartbeat. That moment had clawed under his skin. It wasn't pity. It wasn't guilt. It was something deeper, something unnameable. His phone buzzed on the counter. He ignored it. Across the room, a sleek folder sat open on the glass coffee table, the first page stamped with the logo of Rescare Tech. It was a quarterly proposal, one he'd authored 6 months ago, outlining new AI upgrades for a network of private hospitals across the Midwest. The section, highlighted in yellow, projected nursing staff reduction by 42%. He closed the folder without reading further. When the board had first approved the project, Michael told himself it was progress, efficiency, smart tech saving lives. But now he couldn't stop hearing Sarah's voice from the night before, the soft edge of her guarded thank you at the diner. She used to be a nurse. The phrase rang in his head like an accusation. He made 3 calls that morning. First to Wilson's Diner, confirming she'd been there. Then to Lakeside Hospital, where an old colleague still worked. Finally to a private investigator he'd used for corporate background checks. I need information on a former nurse. First name Sarah, worked at Lakeside until recently. Pediatrics, possibly oncology based on her demeanor with her daughter. She's currently unhoused. The investigator asked no questions beyond the essentials. By afternoon, an email arrived. Sarah Mitchell, 42, former pediatric oncology nurse with an impeccable record. 15 years at Lakeside. Department eliminated during the merger with Mid-America Healthcare Group, a merger Rest Care's technology had facilitated. Took leave to care for her mother with Alzheimer's. Mother died 6 months ago. Unemployment ran out. Eviction followed. Daughter Emma, age 9, honor roll student before their situation changed. The report included a photo from the hospital website. Sarah in blue scrubs, smiling beside other nurses at a holiday fundraiser. Her hair was longer than pulled back in a neat ponytail. Her eyes bright with purpose. Michael sat back in his chair, the air leaving his lungs slowly. His company's algorithm had determined that Lakeside's pediatric oncology unit could be consolidated with 3 others in the city, utilizing AI diagnostics to reduce staffing needs. The recommendation had saved Mid-America Healthcare Group millions. It had also apparently put Sarah Mitchell on that bench. He closed the file and made one more call. Riverside Inn on Madison. I need a room. 1 week paid in advance. Something clean, quiet, no questions asked. Later that afternoon, he returned to the Hope Community Center, the one near the church kitchen where she volunteered. He didn't ask for Sarah by name, just sat in the waiting area pretending to review donor paperwork until a familiar voice reached his ears from the back hallway. Double glove the box on the left. That batch leaks. Her, Sarah. He turned slightly, careful not to seem obvious. She moved with precision, sorting donated medical supplies with another volunteer. Her posture was straight, her hands quick, her expression focused. She wasn't performing. She didn't even know he was there. That struck him harder than it should have. He noticed an elderly man in a Vietnam veteran cap watching him from across the room. The man's weathered face studied Michael with calm assessment before approaching, slowly leaning on a wooden cane. Don't see many suits in here, the man said, his voice a graveled whisper. You looking for someone or just slumming? Michael met his gaze evenly. Neither, just observing. The man settled into the chair beside him with a soft grunt. Name's Walter. Did 3 tours in Nam, medical course. Could spot a doctor from a mile away. He tilted his head. You got the hands, surgeon. Michael blinked, surprised. Was 20 years. Walter nodded, satisfied. Thought so. You're watching her like she's a patient you're trying to diagnose. Michael didn't deny it. Sarah's good people, Walter continued. Helped my grandson when he was sick. Stayed after her shift to explain everything so we wouldn't be scared. Boy's in remission now. I'm glad, Michael said softly. The system ate her up and spit her out, Walter said, eyes narrowing. Those corporate types decided computers could do her job better. Bullshit. He fixed Michael with a pointed stare. But you already know that, don't you? Michael's jaw tightened. Walter stood with effort. Whatever you're planning, doctor, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. She doesn't need another person to let her down. He shuffled away before Michael could respond. Michael waited until Sarah's shift ended. Outside, the sky was already dimming, twilight draping the buildings in soft gray. Sarah exited through the side door, a rolled-up hoodie under one arm and her daughter's sleeping bag tucked in the other. She nearly walked past him. I didn't mean to surprise you, he said quietly. She froze mid-step, her eyes locked with his, calm, unreadable. You found me, she said. You weren't hiding. Sarah tilted her head. People like you usually don't follow up. I've never met anyone like you before. She said nothing, just watched him, one brow slightly raised. Michael took a slow breath. I am not here with an agenda. No business pitch, no savior complex, just, I've been thinking about you, about your daughter, about what I saw. Sarah's voice was steady. What you saw was one night. That's not my story. Then tell me your story. She blinked, surprised. Then her lips pressed into a thin, tired line. Stories don't matter much when you're just trying to find a warm place to sleep. He stepped forward slightly. Then let me help change that. Her jaw tightened. I don't need rescuing. I didn't say you did. They stood like that for a moment, the air between them charged with everything unspoken. The wind picked up, tugging at her sleeves. Finally, Sarah shifted her stance. I appreciate what you did, she said. The coat the meal, but I've got a rhythm now. Disrupting it, good intentions or not, can be dangerous. Michael nodded slowly. I get that. I don't think you do, she replied. But you're trying and that's something. She turned to leave. Sarah, he said, stopping her. She paused but didn't turn around. There's a motel a few blocks from here, he said. Riverside Inn. Nothing fancy. I've already covered the week. No names, no strings, just a place where the heater works. A long silence. When she spoke, her voice was softer. Why? Because it's 12 degrees tonight, he said, and your daughter deserves better than frostbite. Sarah closed her eyes for a second. Then she nodded once barely. I'll think about it. She walked away into the dusk, coatless, back straight, steps slow but steady. Michael watched until she disappeared around the corner. He didn't follow. He just stood there and whispered to no one, I'll be here tomorrow too. And he meant it. Buihem. The motel sign buzzed faintly in the darkness, one of the neon letters flickering like it couldn't decide whether to give up or keep glowing. Snow fell in slow spirals, dusting the curb, softening the edges of everything. Michael leaned against the post near the front office collar, up-gloved hands buried deep in his coat pockets. He had no idea if she'd come. The desk clerk inside had taken the room key without question, slid it into a plain envelope, and promised not to mention his name. No receipts, no follow-ups, just a warm, clean room paid in advance for 7 nights. He didn't know why he needed to see her walk through that door. Maybe he just needed proof that a small act of humanity could still ripple out. Or maybe it was because the image of Sarah holding her daughter like a shield had carved something permanent into him, something that wouldn't leave. The street was quiet, only the occasional hum of a passing car or the crunch of tires in snow. He glanced at his watch. 9:03 p.m. And then movement at the end of the block. Sarah. She walked slowly, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, his coat buttoned tight. Emma held her hand bundled in layers, her small face peeking out beneath a wool hat. The girl looked up at her mother as they neared, asking something Michael couldn't hear. Sarah didn't speak until they reached the sidewalk in front of the motel. You said the heat works, she asked, voice flat but not cold. It's not luxury, Michael said, standing straighter. But it's clean quiet. Sarah glanced toward the office, then at the building itself, a long row of identical doors, each one hiding its own story. Emma let go of her mother's hand and stepped closer to Michael, curiosity lighting her face. You came back, the little girl said, smiling. I said I would, he answered gently. Emma nodded as if that settled something unspoken. She looked up at the snow, catching a flake on her mitten, then turned back to her mom. Can we go inside now? My toes feel like ice cubes. Sarah nodded, then looked at Michael, her eyes sharp. I don't want to owe you. You don't, he said quietly. You're not a debt. Her shoulders tightened for a second, then dropped. He handed her the envelope. Room 7. No check-in needed. There's extra blankets and the bathroom stocked. Sarah took the envelope slowly. You really planned this out? I didn't plan for anything, he said. I just wanted you both to be warm tonight. She looked at him for a long moment. Not grateful, not soft, just searching as if waiting for the part where the story turned and he asked for something in return. He didn't. I'll check out in the morning, she said. No rush, Michael replied. The room's yours for the week. Sarah hesitated, then turned, guiding Emma toward the door marked 7. She slid the key in, pushed it open, and disappeared inside without another word. The door closed with a soft thud. Michael exhaled. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. The next morning, Sarah woke to silence. No car horns, no shivering, just the hum of the heater and the faint rhythm of Emma's breathing beside her. The girl was curled like a cat under 3 layers of blankets, one foot sticking out. Sarah sat up slowly, unsure what day it even was. She blinked at the plain white walls, the beige curtains. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't rushing through mental checklists, no patrol schedules to avoid, no soup kitchen queues, no bench to guard from strangers. Her body didn't ache. That alone felt like a betrayal. Emma stirred. Mommy, can we stay here forever? Sarah smiled sadly. Just a few nights, baby. Just enough to rest. Emma yawned, her voice still thick with sleep. Did the nice man leave? Sarah paused. He might have. But he gave us a room. That means he likes us, right? It means he didn't walk by, Sarah said, and that matters. But her voice faltered because she didn't understand him either. That afternoon, Sarah stepped outside, coat zipped to her chin, the motel key in her pocket. She told Emma to nap, then walked down the street to the small strip mall nearby. There was a corner bakery she remembered from her nursing shifts. Cheap coffee, warm bread, and no questions. As she sipped from a paper cup, she caught sight of a familiar figure through the glass window. Michael seated at a booth laptop, open coat draped over the back of the chair. He didn't see her at first. He was staring at the screen, a crease between his brows. She debated walking away, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the heat from the coffee in her hands, or the way the morning had felt so strangely quiet. Maybe it was Emma's voice from earlier. She stepped inside. He looked up the moment the bell above the door chimed. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. "Did you come to check if I use the room?" she asked. "No," he replied. "I come here when I need quiet." She raised an eyebrow. "A tech CEO needs quiet. More than you think." She slid into the booth across from him, setting her cup down. "Why are you doing this?" she asked directly. "And don't say because it's cold." He met her eyes, didn't flinch. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but you matter, and not just because of what I saw at the bus stop." Sarah folded her arms. "You don't even know me." "I'd like to," Michael said. Silence fell between them. She studied him carefully. Too carefully. "What's your story?" she asked. He looked out the window. "I used to be a surgeon," he said. "My wife got sick. Cancer. I left medicine. Built something that would have saved her faster than I ever could." Sarah didn't speak. "I buried myself in code and numbers," he continued. "It was easier than remembering what helplessness felt like." Her voice was quiet. "You think helping me undoes that?" "No," he said. "But it's the first time in a long time I've felt something real." She looked away. The snow outside catching in gentle sheets on the sidewalk. "People always come in with good intentions," she said. "They give coats, food a night indoors, then they vanish." "I'm not trying to be a savior, Sarah." "Then what are you trying to be?" He didn't answer right away. "Maybe someone who doesn't vanish." Her eyes softened barely, but then she stood. "I have to get back." He nodded, not pushing. "Same time tomorrow." "We'll see." She walked to the door, paused, and without turning, said, "Thank you, but don't make promises you won't keep." Then she stepped out into the snow, leaving behind the scent of coffee and something unspoken. Michael watched her go, a strange ache rising in his chest. She didn't trust him, not yet, but she hadn't walked past him either. And that was a beginning. The motel heater hissed softly, a steady hum that filled the silence between them. Sarah sat at the small table by the window legs tucked underneath her, flipping through a local job bulletin she'd picked up from the Hope Community Center. The pages were thin, smudged with ink. Line cook, part-time custodian, overnight front desk, no health insurance. Each listing felt like a reminder of how far she'd fallen and how steep the climb back would be. Emma was sprawled across the bed behind her, humming, while she traced shapes on the fogged-up window with her fingertip. Her voice rose and fell like a lullaby, only she knew. "You used to work at a hospital?" Emma asked, not turning around. "I did," Sarah replied softly. "Did they have snacks?" Sarah smiled despite herself. "Sometimes, but only on birthdays." "Do you think you'll go back there?" Her smile faded. "I don't think they'd remember me." A knock interrupted her thoughts. She froze. No one knew they were here. She hadn't told anyone, hadn't left a name. She stood slowly, heart inching toward her throat. "Who is it?" she called out. "It's Michael." Her shoulders dropped, but not in relief. She glanced back at Emma. The girl was already climbing off the bed. Sarah cracked the door open, keeping the latch in place. Michael stood there holding a paper bag and two to-go coffee cups, cheeks slightly red from the cold, his breath visible. "I come bearing offerings," he said with a tentative smile. Sarah hesitated. Emma peeked from behind her. "Is that hot chocolate?" the girl asked. Michael nodded. "With whipped cream." The door clicked shut for a second. Sarah unlatched the chain and opened it fully. "You didn't need to come here," she said. "I know," he said, "but I thought maybe we could talk." She stepped aside reluctantly, and he entered with quiet caution, as though the room were sacred and fragile all at once. Sarah gestured to the small table. "Sit before Emma tackles you." Michael set the drinks down and pulled out muffins, napkins, a few clementines. "It's not gourmet, but it's warm." Emma grabbed her cup and climbed back onto the bed, sipping carefully. Sarah took the seat across from him, folding her arms. "You've already done more than most people in this city. Why are you still here?" Michael looked down, ran a hand over the back of his neck. "I guess I don't have a good answer for that." "Try," she said, not unkindly. He met her eyes. "Because you didn't ask me for anything. Because you didn't smile to make me feel better. Because for once, I saw someone who didn't need saving. They just needed someone not to walk past. Sarah inhaled sharply, blinking once as if the weight of that answer landed somewhere she hadn't been ready for. I don't trust easily, she said. I'm not asking you to. Then what are you asking? Michael hesitated. Time, a little space, conversation. She looked at him carefully, watching the way his jaw tensed slightly when she didn't speak, how he avoided eye contact but kept his voice steady. What do you want from me, Michael? Nothing, he said. I don't want to walk away. A quiet beat passed. I have been let down more times than I can count, Sarah said, voice barely above a whisper. By the system, by coworkers, by people who promised they'd help and disappeared the second it got inconvenient. I'm not them. I don't know that. I know, he said gently, but maybe over time I can show you. She turned away, blinking at the window. I was a good nurse, she said. I knew every protocol, every patient name. I stayed late, ran back when short-staffed, covered extra shifts. I don't doubt that. And then they closed my unit without warning. Just gone. Budget cuts. Her voice cracked. I got a severance check and a thank you email. Michael swallowed. I'm sorry. She shrugged, but the motion was brittle. My mother died a week later. We didn't even have a funeral. I used the last of my savings for a cremation. Emma doesn't remember her, but she used to sing her lullabies. Emma's soft humming in the background suddenly felt like an echo. I didn't mean to fall this far, Sarah said. I just stopped being able to get back up. Michael reached across the table slowly. His hand rested near hers, not touching, just there. You haven't failed, he said. You're surviving. That's not weakness. That's endurance, Obamas. Sarah looked down at his hand. Her fingers twitched slightly, but she didn't take it. I don't know how to accept kindness anymore, she said quietly. That's okay, he replied. I'm still going to give it. A long pause. Then Emma asked, Mr. Michael, do you have a home? He turned to her, surprised. I do. Do you live alone? He nodded. Why? Michael's throat tightened. Because I haven't figured out how not to. Emma tilted her head, thoughtful. You can come visit us again. Sarah exhaled a laugh, small but real. Careful, she said. She doesn't forget promises. Neither do I, Michael replied. He stood slowly. I'll let you both rest. Sarah walked him to the door. Before he left, he turned back. I meant what I said yesterday. I'm not here to fix your life, but I'd like to be in it, if you'll let me. She nodded, not quite smiling. We'll see. The door closed softly, and for the first time in a very long time, Sarah stood in the quiet and didn't feel entirely alone. The Hope Community Center smelled like baked bread and old radiator heat. Sarah pulled on a borrowed apron and stood behind the serving line, ladling hot vegetable stew into chip bowls. The kitchen was already buzzing, volunteers chatting softly, the clatter of trays and silverware, the shuffle of boots on tile. It was her second day back in this space, but it felt like years. She worked fast, mechanically. The rhythm of it grounded her. Chop, stir, serve. She didn't look up much, didn't want to. The soup kitchen wasn't a place for eye contact, not when everyone there was trying not to be seen, or worse, remembered. Hey, Sarah, a warm voice called out. She glanced up to see Martha, short, sharp-eyed gray curls tucked under a knit cap, walking in with 2 canvas bags full of donated bread. Martha had been here for over a decade, long enough to know every regular by name and every story by heart. You're early, Sarah said, grateful for the distraction. Martha set the bags down and shrugged off her coat. Well, I figured you'd need help this morning. Sarah offered a faint smile. Always. As they worked side by side, Martha gave her a look. You're quieter than usual. Sarah stirred the pot in front of her, watching steam curl toward the ceiling. Just tired, she said. But her voice lacked weight, like it didn't even believe itself. Martha didn't press. Not yet. She never did. But Sarah could feel the question hanging there, waiting. She knew what Martha wanted to ask. It had been 3 days since Michael had dropped off breakfast at the motel, since he'd sat across from her with his quiet steadiness and kind eyes offering no agenda, just presence. And Sarah hadn't seen him since. Not that she expected him to come back. She'd told herself over and over it didn't matter if he did. That kindness wasn't a contract. but the space he left behind was louder than she anticipated. She was rinsing a ladle at the sink when the door creaked open behind her. She turned instinctively. There he was. Michael stepped into the community center, slowly, his eyes adjusting to the dim light, hands stuffed awkwardly in his coat pockets. His hair was tousled, like he'd run a hand through it a dozen times before walking in. Martha looked up, curious. Sarah froze. "Hi," Michael said, a little breathless. "I wasn't sure you'd be here." "I wasn't sure you'd look," she replied too quickly. He offered a half smile. "I've been trying to find the right moment." "There is no right moment here," she said. "Just keep moving or get run over by the lunch line." Michael's gaze softened. "Then I'll move." She went back to drying utensils, heart pounding louder than the industrial fan humming above them. Martha arched a brow at Sarah, then leaned toward Michael with a conspiratorial grin. "You wash dishes?" "I do now," he replied, stepping toward the sink. Martha laughed. "Well then, welcome to the hardest working corner in Chicago." Sarah passed him a stack of trays without looking up. He rolled up his sleeves without a word and started rinsing, quiet, careful, like she might vanish if he moved too fast. For a few minutes, the three of them worked in silence, just the swish of water, the clatter of cutlery, the distant chatter of diners in the next room. Eventually, Martha ducked out to check supplies, leaving them alone. "You didn't have to come," Sarah said softly, still facing the sink. "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." She dried her hands, slowly turned to face him. "Why?" He hesitated, then set the tray down and looked at her directly. "Because I haven't stopped thinking about you," he said, "and not because I pity you or because I want to swoop in and solve everything. That's not what this is." Sarah's arms folded across her chest, her voice steady. "Then what is it?" Michael's eyes didn't waver. "It's me seeing someone who still shows up to serve others even when she barely has anything herself. It's me realizing I feel more honest around you than I do in boardrooms with people I've known for years." She held his gaze, but something in her expression shifted. A softness, a question. "Do you always talk like that?" she asked. He smiled. "Only when I mean it." Sarah exhaled, a small laugh escaping her. "You really don't know how to be casual, do you? Not when it comes to people who matter." Her face went still again. Serious. "You don't know me, Michael." "I'd like to," he said, "if you'll let me." A pause, then Sarah took a small step back. "There's a kid in the line who shows up every Wednesday. Doesn't talk on it, but he always asks for 2 rolls, one for him, one for someone who never comes." Michael frowned. "Why?" "Because it makes him feel less alone," she said. "Sometimes people pretend company to survive." He looked down. "Are you pretending with me?" Sarah's voice was quieter now. "I haven't decided yet." They stood like that, just two people on opposite sides of a beat-up sink, the smell of soup thick in the air, with a whole world of unsaid things sitting between them. Then Martha returned with a bag of onions and a knowing glance. Sarah stepped aside to help, and Michael took the hint. "I'll be here again tomorrow," he said softly. Sarah didn't turn around, but her voice followed him as he walked away. "We'll see." He smiled to himself as he pushed the door open, watched snowflakes brushing his face like tiny reminders that some things were still unfolding. Inside, Sarah wiped her hands on her apron and whispered under her breath, "We always do." The sky had turned that grayish blue that meant snow was coming again, the kind of soft light that made everything feel a little quieter, a little heavier. Sarah stood behind the counter at the Hope Community Center, her sleeves rolled up and her hair tied in a messy knot. She had been slicing carrots for the last half hour, more for the rhythm than necessity. Her hands moved on autopilot, but her mind was restless. Michael hadn't come yesterday. It shouldn't have mattered. She told herself it didn't, but it did. Emma had even asked that morning, casually, while brushing her teeth with a travel-sized tube, "Is Mr. Michael still busy?" Sarah had answered with a vague, "Probably." Now she stared down at the cutting board, suddenly unsure how many carrots she'd already gone through. Too many, not enough. She stopped and closed her eyes for a breath. Martha appeared behind her, setting down a tray of biscuits. "You're slicing those like they offended you." Sarah gave a tired laugh. "Just thinking." Martha gave her a look, the kind that came from years of seeing too much and saying just enough. "Let me guess. Tall, thoughtful, wears guilt like an accessory." Sarah shot her a sharp glance, but it softened almost immediately. "It's not like that." Then what's it like? Sarah didn't answer right away. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, set the knife down, and leaned against the counter. He's different, she said finally. He listens. He doesn't look at me like I'm a project, and he talks to Emma like she's a person, not a cause. Martha crossed her arms. And you're waiting for the catch, aren't you? Always, Sarah said. But sometimes, honey, there isn't a catch. Sometimes it's just timing. Terrible, beautiful timing. Sarah exhaled slowly. The kitchen door creaked open behind them, followed by a soft voice. Hi. Both women turned. Michael stood in the doorway, hair damp from snow coat dusted with flakes. He looked apologetic, a little breathless, a little unsure. I'm sorry I missed yesterday, he said. I got pulled into a board meeting that went sideways. Sarah's stomach twisted at how relieved she felt just seeing him. You don't owe me an explanation, she said more sharply than she intended. He nodded. I know, but I wanted to give you one anyway. Martha excused herself, not subtly. Michael stepped forward, pulling off his gloves. You okay? Sarah busied her hands with the carrots again. I'm fine. You sure? She looked up at him. Why are you here, Michael, really? He paused. Because every time I'm not, it feels like I'm somewhere I don't belong. Sarah blinked. I spent years building something I thought would matter, he continued, and it does in some ways. But when I walk into a room full of suits and numbers, I don't feel seen. I feel sold. But when I'm here watching you work, watching Emma smile, I feel like I exist. Sarah swallowed. You don't even know us. I'm trying to, he said. She put the knife down again. This isn't easy for me. I'm not asking for easy, he said gently. I'm asking for real. She looked at him for a long time. Then quietly, you ever lost something you couldn't fix? Michael's jaw tightened. Yes. My mother was the strongest person I ever knew, Sarah said, her voice low. She raised me on a waitress's salary and bedtime stories. Taught me to sew my own scrubs when I couldn't afford new ones. She died in a hospice bed with no one but me and Emma holding her hand. Michael's voice cracked. I'm sorry. She used to say, people don't need you to be perfect, just present. He nodded. She sounds like someone I wish I'd known. Sarah blinked back sudden wetness. She would have liked you, or maybe warned me about you. Hard to tell. He smiled softly. Smart woman. Sarah reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small photo, faded, worn at the corners. A woman with tired eyes and a radiant smile holding baby Emma. Michael took it, carefully studied it. She looks like you. She was louder, Sarah said with a smile, and stubborn. I've noticed the stubborn part, he teased. She laughed and the sound broke the tension like sunlight breaking through clouds. A silence followed, not heavy but full. Then she said, if you really want to help, the shelter needs hygiene kits. Toothbrushes, soap, simple stuff. Done, he said immediately. Tell me what you need and I'll bring it. Sarah arched an eyebrow. Just like that, he looked at her. I'm not here to impress you. I'm here because I want to stay close. She didn't answer that, but she didn't walk away either. Later that evening, after the kitchen closed and the last trays were stacked, Sarah and Michael stood outside under the awning while the snow fell harder. She looked up at him, breath visible between them. Tomorrow, he asked. She nodded. Tomorrow. She stepped back, brushing snow off her sleeves. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone temporary. Michael's voice was quiet. Maybe I used to be, but not anymore. She didn't speak, just nodded once and turned to go. And as she walked away, Michael whispered to himself, real. I meant it. The Chicago Public Library on State Street always smelled like paper and dusted cinnamon, as if memories lingered in the bindings. Sarah hadn't been there in months, not since before her mother's final weeks. But Emma had begged. Just 1 hour, her daughter had said that morning, eyes wide. They have the big pillows in the puppet corner. And now here they were. Sarah seated at a wooden table near the children's section, watching Emma settle into a beanbag with a picture book twice the size of her lap. It was a strange kind of peace, one she didn't trust yet. It felt borrowed. Sarah rested her arms on the table, letting herself breathe. The motel room was still theirs for another night. She had cleaned Emma's coat this morning in the bathroom sink, hung it near the heater to dry. For once, they didn't wake up to frost on their eyelashes. Across the room, a group of children gathered near the rug for story time. Sarah smiled faintly at the sight. Caregivers coaxing kids into quiet circles. Some toddlers crawling, others bouncing with excitement. A librarian stepped forward, a woman with silver glasses and a warm cardigan holding a book high. And then the door opened. She saw him before he saw her. Michael hair slightly windblown, a folder tucked under one arm. He moved with that unintentional grace she'd come to recognize. Never rushed, never loud, but always like he was carrying something invisible and heavy. Sarah blinked, unsure what to feel. He spotted her a moment later. Their eyes met. He smiled soft and surprised. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said as he approached. "I could say the same." She nodded toward the story corner. "Emma begged me for library time." Michael followed her gaze. "She's good at convincing." Sarah tilted her head. "And what brings you here? Looking for self-help books?" Michael chuckled. "Actually tax documents. Riveting stuff." A silence passed, easy and warm. Then from across the room, Emma's voice rang out. "Mr. Michael!" Sarah froze. Emma was already bounding across the carpet, arms flung wide. Michael caught her in a careful crouch, laughing as she hugged him tight. "You found us," she beamed. "I must have excellent timing," he replied. Sarah rose slowly, unsure whether to be touched or tense. She walked over as Michael gently released Emma. "We were just starting story time," she said. "I wouldn't dream of interrupting," Michael replied, standing. But Emma tugged his hand. "You can sit with us, please." Sarah opened her mouth to decline to redirect. She wasn't sure, but Emma was already pulling him toward the beanbags. Sarah followed, cheeks warming. They settled in, the three of them, forming a small crescent on the rug. The librarian opened the first book, her voice calm and musical, the kind that made the whole room lean forward. It should have been a simple moment, but Sarah couldn't ignore how close Michael sat, how gently his arm rested behind Emma, not touching her, just nearby. She couldn't ignore how natural it felt and how terrifying that was. After the second story, Emma leaned against Michael's side, eyes wide with wonder. He whispered something to her. Sarah couldn't hear what, but Emma giggled, and it wrapped around Sarah's chest like thread pulling too tight. When the final page turned, applause rippled through the room. Emma clapped enthusiastically, then looked up at Michael. "Do you like stories?" "I love them," he said. "Mommy used to read to me every night before we had to move." Sarah stiffened. Michael looked at her, understanding, passing between them. "I bet she told the best ones," he said. Emma nodded. "She makes up voices." Sarah chuckled. "Now you're giving away my secrets." Emma stretched, yawned dramatically, then climbed back into her mother's lap. "I like when we're like this," she mumbled. "Like normal." Sarah's breath caught. Michael didn't speak. They left together when the sky had begun to dim, snow lightly falling in elegant flakes. Emma walked ahead, hopping into every patch of untouched white she could find. Michael and Sarah trailed behind her on the sidewalk. "She misses stability," Sarah said finally, "even if she doesn't have the words for it." "She's strong," Michael said. "She shouldn't have to be," Sarah replied, voice lower. They paused at the corner. The traffic light flicked red to green. Emma waited, turning back, snow in her lashes. "Do you ever think," Sarah asked, "that maybe you were never meant to be the person you became?" Michael looked at her, startled. She didn't wait for his answer. "I trained for medicine," she said. "I was supposed to help people heal, and now I hand out soup with borrowed gloves and sleep on a mattress older than my kid." He didn't speak. Sarah turned to him. "And you left something behind too, didn't you?" He met her eyes. "Yes." "What was it?" "Myself," he said softly. They stood there, wind whispering between buildings. Emma tugged Sarah's hand. "Can we go to the diner? They have the peppermint pancakes." Sarah looked down at her, then at Michael. He smiled faintly. "My treat." Sarah hesitated, but then she nodded. Inside the diner, it was warm and golden and smelled like syrup. They took a corner booth, and Emma colored on the placemat with borrowed crayons. Michael stirred his coffee. Sarah sipped hers in silence. And then softly he said, "I want to do more than show up. I want to stay." Sarah looked at him. Truly looked. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," he admitted. She nodded slowly. "Then we start small." And in that small booth, under flickering lights and over plates of peppermint pancakes, Something fragile and brave began to take root. Not a promise, but a choice. Giano. The Rest Care Tech offices rose like a monument of glass and ambition over downtown Chicago. Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors, polished steel, backlit digital displays, looping success stories and investor headlines. Michael walked through it all with his hands in his coat pockets, eyes forward, but his mind elsewhere. His meeting with Thomas was in less than 5 minutes. He hadn't told Sarah about it. Not yet. The elevator opened with a chime and deposited him onto the executive floor. The contrast was immediate. Sleek furniture, silence punctuated only by keystrokes and perfectly modulated phone voices. Thomas's office door stood slightly ajar. Michael stepped inside. Thomas looked up from a spreadsheet, his reading glasses perched low on his nose. "You're late," he said without looking at the clock. "I'm here," Michael replied evenly, taking the chair across from him. Thomas closed the laptop with a soft snap. "That proposal from Metasphere came through." Michael waited. Thomas leaned back, tapping the folder. "They're ready to buy in. Full implementation of our diagnostic AI across 6 major hospital systems. It's everything we've been building toward. And the staff displacement," Thomas shrugged, "minimal compared to what we saved them. Nurses are overhead, Michael. The tech doesn't call in sick." Michael's jaw clenched. Thomas studied him. "What's going on?" "I met someone," Michael said. That got Thomas's full attention. "Is that why you've been slipping off to community centers and soup kitchens?" Michael didn't respond. Thomas leaned forward. "You know what we do here? You helped build this systems that streamline care, save lives. Are you going to throw that away over a personal side project?" "She's not a project," Michael said. "She's a nurse who lost everything when a hospital we used to partner with shut down their pediatric wing. Her daughter sleeps in a motel room we paid for." Thomas blinked. Michael continued, "And our tech, the one you're about to pitch to 6 new hospitals, would eliminate thousands more like her." "You're being emotional. I'm being human." Thomas sat back, exhaling hard. "You can't fix every broken part of the system by dragging one woman out of it." "I'm not dragging her anywhere," Michael said, standing. "She's the one reminding me what this was supposed to be about." Thomas folded his arms. "If you derail this deal, Michael, the board will ask questions." "Let them." When Michael left the office, he didn't feel triumphant. He felt heavy, but underneath the weight was something else. Conviction. Bam. In the Rest Care Tech conference room, the atmosphere crackled with tension. The quarterly board meeting was about to begin, and Michael stood at the front surrounded by charts, projections, and slides that detailed their AI platform's rapid adoption. Walter, the Vietnam veteran, had texted him that morning. A simple message: "Heard you're facing the suits today. Remember, doctor, you've seen worse. From one medic to another, stand your ground." Michael hadn't asked how Walter knew about the meeting. The old man seemed to have a knack for seeing through people. The board members filed in sleek in designer suits, faces composed in expressions of polite interest. Among them, Thomas took his seat at the long mahogany table, his eyes fixed on Michael, a mixture of concern and challenge in his gaze. "Shall we begin?" the chairwoman asked, her voice crisp as fresh currency. Michael nodded, activating the first slide. On the screen, a graph showed the implementation of Rest Care's diagnostic AI across 217 hospitals nationwide. "As you can see," he began, "our penetration has exceeded projections by 32% this quarter. The Metasphere deal alone would add another 27% market share." Approving murmurs rippled through the room. However, Michael continued, clicking to a new slide. "I've had our data team prepare some additional metrics I think warrant our attention." The screen shifted to show a different graph, one that hadn't been included in the advanced materials. It showed nursing staff reductions across client hospitals following Rest Care implementation. "What exactly are we looking at, Michael?" the chairwoman asked, her voice cooler now. "Reality," he replied. "In the 217 hospitals using our platform, nurse staffing has decreased by an average of 42% within 18 months of adoption." Thomas shifted in his seat. "We've been over this. That's efficiency." "Is it?" Michael clicked again. The next slide showed patient satisfaction scores dropping across those same hospitals. "But readmission rates are down," one board member interjected. "Because our predictive models are good," Michael acknowledged, "but patient experience is suffering. Nurses don't just administer medication and take vitals. They provide human connection, emotional support. Patient education elements our AI can't replicate. Michael, Thomas said, warning in his voice. I spent 20 years as a surgeon, Michael continued. I never once saved a life without a nurse. Not once. We built this company to augment care, not replace the caregivers. He clicked to the final slide of proposal, not for expansion, but for a strategic pivot. Rest Care AI as a supportive tool that would work alongside nurses, not replace them. A nurse-tech partnership program. Retraining instead of layoffs. The Metasphere deal as currently structured would eliminate approximately 200 nursing positions, Michael said. I'm proposing we renegotiate to implement a different model, one that preserves those jobs while still delivering efficiency. Silence fell across the room. The board members exchanged glances. The CFO spoke first. This would reduce our projected revenue by 38% next quarter and increase our long-term sustainability, Michael countered. Healthcare isn't just about numbers. It's about people. We've lost sight of that. Thomas stood now. Michael, may I speak with you outside? They stepped into the hallway, the glass door closing behind them with a soft hiss. What the hell are you doing? Thomas demanded, keeping his voice low. We've been building toward this deal for 3 years. I know. Is this about that nurse, Sarah? Michael's jaw tightened. It's about all of them. It's about what we set out to do when we founded this company. Catherine didn't die because there weren't enough machines, Thomas. She died because her symptoms were dismissed by overworked doctors who didn't have time to listen. Thomas ran a hand through his graying hair. The board won't approve this. You know that. Maybe not, Michael agreed, but I can't sign off on the Metasphere deal as it stands. I won't. They'll vote you out. Then they vote me out. Thomas stared at him for a long moment. You'd throw away everything we've built. Michael looked back through the glass at the board members now in animated discussion. Not everything, he said quietly. Just the parts I can't live with anymore. They returned to the conference room. The discussion lasted 3 more hours. Voices were raised, projections were questioned, alternative models were hastily assembled. In the end, the board agreed to a modified approach, a pilot program at 2 hospitals that would test Michael's nurse-tech partnership model before a final decision on the Metasphere deal. It wasn't a victory, but it was a start. As Michael packed his presentation materials, Thomas approached him again. You know, Thomas said, I always thought you were the pragmatist between us. Michael smiled faintly. So did I. This nurse must be something special. Michael looked at him. She reminded me of something I forgot. What's that? That technology without humanity is just machinery. Thomas nodded slowly. I hope she's worth it. It's not about worth, Thomas. It's about remembering why we're here. As Michael left the building, his phone buzzed with a text from Walter. Still standing, Michael typed back, bloodied but unbowed. The old veteran's response came seconds later. That's how you know it matters. Doc, that's how you know. Later that evening, the sky was thick with snow again. Sarah sat at the diner table with Emma, who was doodling cats on a napkin while humming softly. Sarah watched her with a quiet ache in her chest. There was something about watching your child pretend to be carefree when you knew they were listening to every silence between your words. Michael entered, brushing snow off his coat, his hair damp from the wind. He looked tired but lit from within. Sarah smiled faintly. Rough day. He sat down across from her. Thomas isn't thrilled with me. Thomas, my business partner, co-founder, visionary capitalist. Sarah's eyes sharpened. You told him about me. I told him about what we're doing, Michael said, and what we're not doing anymore. Sarah leaned in slightly. Which is? Michael took a slow breath. We're pulling out of the Metasphere deal. Her eyes widened. Michael, I can't push a platform that cuts care just to raise stock value. But that's massive. That's a 7-figure deal, isn't it? 8. Sarah stared at him. You gave it up for me. No, he said gently. For every nurse like you. For every patient who won't be a line item in an algorithm. She didn't know what to say. Her voice had evaporated somewhere between her heart and her throat. I'm not a hero, Michael said, voice quieter now. I just stopped wanting to be a ghost in my own company. Sarah reached for her coffee, hands trembling slightly. That kind of decision has fallout. I know. Will the board come after you? Probably. And you're okay with that? Michael looked at her. I'm not sure, but I am sure of you. That made her look away. Michael, she said after a long pause, whatever this is between us, it's moving fast. I know. And I'm not someone you date for image or nostalgia. I come with eyes, a whole card of them. I see them. She met his eyes again. And you're not scared off. I'm terrified, he said. But not of you, of doing nothing. A silence stretched between them, full of meaning. Then Emma looked up, holding her drawing high. I made us a family picture. Sarah blinked fast. The paper showed three stick figures, one tall with a tea, one in scrubs with a bun, and a little girl holding both their hands. Michael reached for it, voice soft. Can I keep this? Emma grinned. Only if you promise to come back. Sarah felt something crack open in her chest. Michael looked at both of them. I promise. And he meant it. Every word, every choice, even the ones that would cost him. The invitation came in a plain white envelope slipped under the door of Sarah's motel room just before noon. No note, no handwriting, just a folded piece of thick paper inside with the name of a restaurant printed in elegant gold script in a time 7 p.m. She knew immediately who it was from. Michael hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't stopped by the community center that morning. And yet here he was again, showing up in ways that were both gentle and bold. She stood in the middle of the room, holding the invite like it might disappear if she blinked. Emma peeked up from the motel bed where she was practicing letters on a napkin. Did Mr. Michael leave us a treasure map? Sarah gave a small laugh hollow in her chest. Something like that. Part of her wanted to go deeply to sit across from him and feel just for an hour like the world wasn't crumbling under her feet. But another part, the heavier part, didn't trust what waited on the other side of a linen tablecloth in soft candlelight. People like Michael lived in glass towers and private boardrooms. Sarah had scrubbed hospital floors at 200 a.m. because housekeeping didn't show. She'd worn the same pair of sneakers through 2 winters. There was no common ground between them. Not really. Just this strange warm thread that kept pulling tighter closer. At 6:55, she stood across the street from the restaurant. Snow drifted gently in the air. She watched the host at the window checking a reservation list. The glow from inside soft and golden. She didn't belong here. Not in these second-hand boots. Not in this thrifted coat. Not with hair she tried to tame with drugstore lotion. Still she crossed the street. The host smiled when she stepped inside, not batting an eye. Table for 2. Yes, she said, her voice low. He led her toward the back of the room past couples, speaking in hushed tones past the clink of wine glasses and soft jazz music humming through hidden speakers. Michael was already seated clean-cut, a charcoal gray blazer, no tie. He stood as she approached. Sarah. Michael. He pulled out her chair. She sat slowly. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. I wasn't sure either. He smiled gently. Thank you. Sarah looked around. This place is beautiful. I used to come here with clients, always felt a little too polished. She raised an eyebrow. And now, I wanted to share it with someone real. Their eyes met. Something softened in the space between them. Menus arrived, orders were placed. Small talk danced across the table like cautious footsteps. But the air shifted the moment Sarah excused herself to the restroom. She walked down a short hallway lined with framed awards and photographs, donor dinners, fundraisers, galas. She passed them without looking until one caught the edge of her vision. A plaque with Michael's name etched in gold. Rest Care Tech founding sponsor. Below it, a photo. Sarah's heart slowed. It was him. Michael's smiling, arm draped around Thomas Vance, standing in front of a massive check being handed to the very hospital group that had absorbed and then shut down her pediatric unit. She stared at it, frozen. The hallway felt colder now. Her breath caught. Her hands trembled. She walked back to the table slowly, her face unreadable. Michael looked up as she sat. Everything okay? You never told me, she said quietly. Told you what? That you funded the closure that took my job. Michael blinked. Sarah, I saw the photo. His voice caught. That deal was supposed to expand services, not cut them. I didn't know they'd But they did, and you were part of it. The table went still. So did the room, at least in her mind. Sarah stood sliding her napkin off her lap. Sarah, wait, please. I can't do this, she whispered. I thought you were different. I am. Then why does this feel exactly the same? He rose too, his voice low but urgent. Because I was trying to undo it. Because I'm still trying. She shook her head, stepping back. I can't be your redemption project, Michael. I don't have the energy to be the story that fixes you. He didn't follow her. He didn't beg. He just stood there breathing hard, watching her walk out of the restaurant and disappear into the snow. And as she turned the corner, heart thudding in her chest, Sarah wasn't sure if she was leaving behind a mistake or the only good thing she hadn't seen coming. The motel room was silent except for the hum of the heater and the gentle rustle of Emma's coloring pencil across the back of her receipt. Sarah sat at the small table, fingers curled around a chipped coffee mug she hadn't sipped from in 20 minutes. Her thoughts swirled like the snow beyond the window, slow, disorienting cold. She hadn't answered Michael's texts. 3, maybe 4 had come in over the last 2 days. None pushy, just him. I didn't know. Please let me explain. You matter still. She didn't know what to do with that. Across the room, Emma looked up. Are we still seeing Mr. Michael tomorrow? Sarah swallowed. No, sweetheart. Emma paused, blinking. Did he move away? No, he just, Sarah trailed off, eyes stinging. Sometimes grown-ups stop showing up the way we want them to. Emma thought about that for a moment. I liked it when he read stories. Sarah nodded, barely holding it together. Me too. There was a soft knock at the door. Not urgent, just a tap-tap in stillness. Sarah stood slowly and crossed the room, heart in her throat. When she opened the door, Martha stood there, her cheeks pink from the wind, holding a paper envelope in one gloved hand and a small brown paper bag in the other. I figured you weren't coming to the center today, she said gently. So I brought the center to you. Sarah stepped aside. Martha entered, shedding her coat with practiced grace and setting the items on the table. Chicken and rice, she said. Still warm. Thank you, Sarah murmured. Martha didn't sit. She just looked at Sarah with eyes too knowing. You want to talk? She asked. Sarah shook her head. All right, Martha said, reaching into her pocket. Then I'll talk just for a second. She pulled out the envelope and handed it over. What is this? Sarah asked. It's a letter. Well, kind of. More like a receipt. Martha sighed. Michael dropped it off at the center yesterday. Didn't say much. Just asked me to give it to you. Sarah hesitated, then took the envelope. Martha gave her a moment, then smiled softly. I'll check on you tomorrow. Don't disappear. And then she left. Sarah sat down and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper neatly folded. No greeting, no signature, just a scan of a cancellation letter from Rescare Tech to Metasphere Systems. Withdrawal of contract and licensing agreement effective immediately. Below it, a handwritten note in the margin. I walked away. I don't know if it's enough, but I couldn't keep building something that erased people like you. People who taught me what care actually means. Sarah's fingers trembled. Behind the letter was something else. A photo. An old one. A hospital hallway, worn linoleum floors. A young Michael in scrubs, arm around a patient, smiling like he hadn't yet learned how grief rewrites the body. On the back, scribbled in the same pen, before I forgot who I was. Sarah pressed the paper against her chest. That night, long after Emma fell asleep, curled beneath 2 blankets and her favorite pillow, Sarah sat in the dark, staring out the window. The snow had stopped. The sky was clear, stars faint but present. She hadn't realized how heavy the weight of survival had become, or how rare it was to feel remembered. The next morning, she rose early and walked to the Hope Community Center before it opened. She needed to move, to breathe, to sort cans if no one wanted her to speak. But Martha was already there, organizing the morning prep. Sarah stepped inside. You knew. Martha didn't look up. Knew what? That he walked away from the deal. Martha finally met her eyes. I knew he was scared, and that he did it anyway. Sarah's voice cracked. Why would he do that for me? Martha shook her head. Not for you, honey, because of you. Sarah wiped her eyes and reached for an apron. Across town, Michael stood in the quiet of his empty office. The plaque with his name was gone from the wall. The framed award he once displayed now inside a cardboard box near the door. He hadn't heard from Sarah. He didn't expect to, but he'd meant it. Every line of the letter, every choice. He reached into the box and pulled out a photo of his wife, held it for a long time. "I think she's the kind of person you would have liked," he whispered. "She doesn't ask for space, she earns it." His phone buzzed. One new message from Sarah. Just 2 words. "Come talk." And for the first time in a very long time, Michael smiled. The Hope Community Center was closed for the morning, but Sarah stood behind the counter anyway, wiping down surfaces that didn't need it, lining up ladles that had already been stacked. Her hands needed something to do. Her heart not so much. She kept checking the clock on the wall. The ticking felt louder today. At 9:42 a.m., the front door opened quietly. Michael stepped in, coat unzipped, scarf damp with melted snow. His eyes found her instantly. Sarah didn't move. She just looked at him. "I got your message," he said softly. "I almost deleted it," she replied. He stepped closer, not too close. "I'm glad you didn't." Sarah reached for a dish towel she didn't need and folded it, then unfolded it again. "You didn't have to do what you did. I know. You risked your company, your reputation, your future." "I didn't do it to prove anything," he said. "I did it because I was finally ready to stand behind what I say I believe." She exhaled. I don't know how to let someone stand with me when I've spent so long standing alone." "I'm not here to stand in front of you," Michael said, voice steady. "I'm here beside you, no spotlight, no savior act." Sarah turned toward him, then arms crossed, her eyes tired but sharp. "You made a mess," she said. He nodded. "I know. And it hurt. I know. But you owned it." He didn't speak, just watched her breath, slow, patient. Sarah walked around the counter, feet quiet on the tile. She stood in front of him now, the air between them full and still. "My mother used to say people don't change when they're comfortable," she said. "Only when it costs them something." "It cost me," he said, "but I still don't regret it." Sarah nodded. "Good." A beat passed. "I'm not perfect," she said. "Good," Michael replied, voice softer. "I'm tired of perfect." They stood in silence, not needing to fill it. The kind of silence that made room for breath, for truth. Then Sarah asked, "What do you want, Michael?" "Not someday, not theoretically. Right now." He blinked. "Right now, darling. Right now. I want to build something that matters, not just a company, a life, one that doesn't disappear the second it gets hard." "And me? You're the part that keeps me honest," he said. "And that scares me, but I want that too." Sarah looked down at the floor for a long moment. When she looked back up, her eyes were glassy but strong. "I don't have anything to offer you but honesty," she said, "and hard days and a daughter who asks questions no one's ready for." "I want all of it," he said without hesitation. A tear slipped down Sarah's cheek. She laughed once quietly and wiped it away with the back of her hand. "You always talk like you're reading from some invisible script." "I'm terrified," he admitted, "but I mean every word." Sarah stepped forward. She didn't touch him. Not yet. But the space between them disappeared. "Then stop talking," she whispered. And for a long moment, they just stood there, eyes closed, forehead to forehead, nothing but breath and proximity and the heavy, sacred ache of being seen. Later that afternoon, they walked to the park down the block from the shelter. Emma ran ahead, crunching through the snow scarf trailing behind her like a comet's tail. Michael and Sarah walked slowly, shoulder to shoulder. "I still don't know what's next," Sarah said. "That makes two of us. But you're used to leading." "I'm learning how to follow," he said with a smirk. She nudged him gently with her elbow. "I think we should build something," she said, "Sipateron. Something for people like me, like us. A place where care doesn't get buried under policy." Michael looked at her. "Tell me what you need." "I need a building," she said. "I need volunteers. I need coffee, a lot of it." He smiled. "And I need someone to help me fight through the red tape without losing my temper." "I know a guy," she said. "I bet you do." They stopped near a bench as Emma flopped down to make a lopsided snow angel. "You ever think," Sarah said, "maybe we were supposed to find each other when we were both falling apart?" Michael nodded. "That's the only way people fit sometimes, in the cracks." She looked at him quieter now. I was afraid I'd lose myself in you. You didn't, he said. You reminded me who I used to be. And just like that, the snow started again. Soft flakes drifting like the sky had decided it was okay to let go. Sarah watched Emma throw her arms wide to catch them. Then she looked at Michael, her voice barely audible over the wind. Don't make promises you can't keep. I'm not, he said. I'm making one I want to earn. And for the first time in a very long time, she believed him. The building looked like nothing at first, just an old brick structure on the edge of Parkview windows, boarded snow piled up against its uneven steps. A faded for lease sign hung crooked above the door. Paint peeled from the siding like the place had forgotten what it meant to be touched. Sarah stood on the sidewalk in silence, hands tucked into her coat, breath forming soft clouds in front of her lips. This is it, she asked. Michael nodded, standing beside her. It used to be a pediatric clinic. Closed 4 years ago. The city's been sitting on it since. She looked up at the facade, tilting her head slightly. It's a little sad. Most beginnings are, he said. Sarah let that hang between them before she asked, You bought this? I leased it under my name, he said. Low monthly through a community grant. Quietly for now. Didn't want your name tied to it unless you wanted it to be. She turned toward him slowly. You did all this without telling me. I wanted to show you the idea before I offered the keys. Sarah looked back at the building. 100 thoughts raced through her mind. Permits, insurance, zoning laws, renovations. Then beyond that, beds, triage rooms, volunteers, dignity, access care that didn't feel like begging. Let me guess, she said. You already called someone about plans. Michael smirked. Maybe just an architect who owed me a favor. Sarah smiled in spite of herself. You really don't know how to think small, do you? I thought small for a long time, he said. Then I met you. She glanced at the front steps again, where the snow had started to melt in patches. Can I see inside? I was hoping you'd ask. He led her up the narrow walkway, unlocking the rusted door. The hinges groaned as it opened. The inside smelled like dust and old carpet, but the light from the tall windows reached across the empty floor like it still remembered how to welcome people. Sarah stepped inside, slowly taking it in. The bones were solid. There was a reception desk near the front, faded signs still hanging on the wall. Check-in, waiting room, vaccinations. It's bigger than I expected, she murmured, stepping into the open space where sunlight stretched across the floor in long, tired stripes. I figured it could be a hybrid, Michael said behind her. Community care, basic treatment, family services, maybe even housing assistance upstairs. Whatever you dream up. Sarah turned around. You're serious about letting me lead this? I don't want to own this, he said. I want to build it with you. She stared at him for a long moment. Most people with your kind of money would have torn this place down, she said. I've already torn enough things down, Michael replied. I'd rather help build something that heals. Sarah walked deeper into the room. Her footsteps echoed. She passed old exam rooms with paper still clinging to the walls. A stack of forgotten chairs leaned against one corner as if waiting for a purpose. In the far back, she paused at a narrow room with a frosted glass window. It had been an office once. She pushed the door open gently. Inside, the walls were blank except for one thing. A plaque mounted above a clean wooden shelf, Eleanor House. Sarah's breath caught. She turned sharply. What is this? Michael stepped into the doorway, hands in his coat pockets. It's yours, he said. Or rather, it's your mother's. Sarah blinked, eyes suddenly brimming. You named the whole place after her, she whispered. I listened, he said. She was the one who taught you to show up even when everything falls apart. This place is her legacy as much as it is yours. Sarah walked over to the plaque, fingertips tracing the edge of the wood. You remembered her name. I remembered everything. Her shoulders shook once, and she let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. She'd call you dramatic. She'd be right, Michael said. Sarah turned to face him, her voice trembling. What if I fail? Then we fail together, he said, and we get up together. Sarah exhaled, tears slipping quietly now. I haven't let myself hope like this in a long time. Michael stepped closer, not to fix, not to hold, just to be near. You don't have to hope alone. She nodded slowly. Then after a long pause, she said, All right, let's build this thing. Michael smiled. You sure? No, Sarah said, but that's never stopped me before. They stood in the stillness of the empty clinic, snowlight pouring through the windows, dust rising around their ankles like tiny ghosts letting go. And for the first time, the space didn't feel abandoned. It felt alive, waiting. Sarah looked around once more, then whispered under her breath, just loud enough for the walls to remember, we're coming back, this time for good. Walter shuffled into the building, leaning heavily on his cane, a Vietnam veteran's cap pulled low over his lined face. Behind him came three more elderly men, all with military bearing despite their years. One pushed a wheelbarrow filled with tools. Another carried a box of old medical supplies salvaged from a VA center closing across town. Reporting for duty, Doc, Walter said, saluting Michael with two fingers. Brought reinforcements. Michael smiled, extending his hand. I didn't ask you to do this. Didn't have to, the old veteran replied, clasping Michael's hand firmly. Word gets around. Besides, we know something about rebuilding. The men spread through the empty rooms of the future Eleanor house, assessing what needed to be done. They were retired now, a carpenter, an electrician, a plumber, and Walter, who'd been a combat medic before becoming a hospital administrator. Needs work, the electrician noted, examining the fuse box, but not as much as they said. Walter nodded. These boys saved my life in Nam. Thought they might help save this place too. Michael studied him. Why are you doing this? The old man's eyes were steady. Because we know what it means to come back from the edge, to be forgotten, to need someone to stand with you. He gestured to Sarah, who was across the room, showing Emma how to sweep. That woman's got the same look my nurses had in the field hospital, tired but unbroken. Michael nodded. Besides, Walter added, what else am I going to do? Watch game shows all day. By noon, they had mapped out the most urgent repairs. The plumbing still worked. The wiring needed partial updates. The roof had two small leaks but was structurally sound. We can have this place operational in 3 weeks, Walter declared. Won't be pretty, but it'll be safe. Sarah approached, dust smudged across one cheek. 3 weeks? That's impossible. Walter smiled. Ma'am, with all due respect, I've built field hospitals in actual war zones. This is just Chicago. She laughed, the sound bright against the building's tired walls. Michael watched them, something expanding in his chest. This wasn't charity. This was community, the thing that had been missing from every business plan, every corporate strategy session, every board meeting he'd ever attended. That afternoon, Thomas arrived unannounced. He stood in the doorway, surveying the scene, veterans patching drywall, Sarah organizing a makeshift intake desk, Emma carefully labeling bins for supplies. So this is what dragged you away from the Metasphere deal, he said, voice neutral. Michael wiped his hands on a rag. This is it, Thomas stepped inside, shoes echoing on the bare floor. The board is concerned. I imagine they are. They want to know if you're having some kind of breakdown. Michael laughed. Maybe I am. The good kind. Thomas surveyed the space more carefully now. What exactly are you planning here? A hybrid clinic, primary care, community services, education, housing assistance. The things insurance forms don't cover, but people need to stay healthy. In the business model, sliding scale, grants, donations, partnership with the community college nursing program. Thomas shook his head. It's not sustainable. Maybe not by Wall Street standards, Michael conceded, but neither is what we've been doing. Thomas walked further into the space, stopping to examine the blueprints spread across a folding table. Sarah approached, arms folded across her chest. You must be Thomas, she said, and you must be Sarah. He studied her. Michael's thrown away a fortune because of you. She didn't flinch. No, he remembered what a fortune is actually for. Thomas almost smiled. You're not what I expected. That's because you've been counting the wrong things, she replied. The business partner turned back to Michael. The board wants a decision by Friday. Either you come back and focus on rest care, or they vote on your replacement. Michael nodded. Tell them I'll have an answer. When Thomas left, Sarah touched Michael's arm lightly. You don't have to choose this, she said. Your company is important. So is this, he replied. Walter limped over, his weathered face serious. Son, I couldn't help overhearing. If you need to go back to your company, we'll keep working here. We've got momentum now. Michael looked between them, Sarah with her quiet dignity, Walter with his stubborn resolve. I built res care to save lives, he said, but somewhere along the way I forgot what saving actually looks like. Later that night, Michael sat alone in his penthouse looking out over the Chicago skyline. The city lights blurred through a light snowfall, each one representing lives he couldn't see from this height. His phone chimed with an email from the board. The subject line read, "Final Notice." He didn't open it. Instead, he typed a new message to Thomas: "I'm stepping down as CEO. The company needs someone who believes in its current direction. That's not me anymore. I'll retain my ownership stake but relinquish operational control. The Eleanor House project will be my focus going forward. This isn't a negotiation. It's a farewell." He pressed send before he could reconsider. Then he called Sarah. "I just resigned," he said when she answered. A long silence. "Then are you okay?" "I think I'm more okay than I've been in 7 years." "Michael, I'm not doing this for you," he said quickly. "I'm doing it for me, for the person I want to be when I look in the mirror." Her voice was soft. "That person is worth knowing." "I hope so," he whispered. "I really hope so." Bueno. The permits were the first challenge. City regulations for medical facilities were complex, designed for large hospital systems with teams of lawyers, not community clinics run by a former nurse and a resigned CEO. Michael spent 3 days at City Hall moving from office to office, file folders thick with applications clutched in his hands. Each desk sent him to another, each form required 3 more. On the 4th day, he sat in the waiting area of the zoning commission, tie loosened, patience thinning. A man in his 70s settled into the chair beside him. "You look like you've been through the ringer, son." Michael glanced up. The man wore a tailored suit that had seen better days, but his eyes were sharp. "Just trying to cut through bureaucracy," Michael replied. "For what purpose?" "Opening a community clinic in Parkview, the old pediatric center on Elm." The man straightened. "I know that building. Took my granddaughter there when she broke her arm. Good doctors. Quick service." He extended his hand. "Harold Jenkins. I used to be deputy commissioner before I retired." Michael shook his hand. "Michael Reynolds, the rest care fellow. Read about you stepping down. Caused quite a stir." Michael nodded. "What's your holdup with the permits?" Jenkins asked. "Everything. Zoning, occupancy, medical licensing. The system seems designed to make this impossible." Jenkins chuckled. "It is. Keeps the little guys out, ensures the big hospital groups maintain their monopolies." He leaned closer. "But there are pathways, exemptions. I've tried those. Not with the right guide, you haven't." Jenkins pulled out a business card. "My daughter runs the community service division now. Tell her I sent you. She knows the shortcuts." 2 days later, with Jenkins' daughter's help, the preliminary permits were approved. Not all of them, but enough to begin renovations in earnest. When Michael told Sarah, she looked skeptical. "Just like that. Just like that," he confirmed. "Sometimes the universe throws you a bone." "Or a retired commissioner," she replied. He smiled. "Either way, we're moving forward." The first real test came 6 weeks later. The building renovations were nearly complete: new plumbing, updated electrical, fresh paint, donated examination tables, and repaired heating system. Walter and his veteran crew had worked tirelessly, turning the abandoned clinic into something that resembled a medical facility again. Sarah had recruited 3 former nursing colleagues who'd been downsized in the same merger that cost her job. They agreed to volunteer 2 days a week, each creating a rotation that would allow Eleanor House to offer basic medical services 6 days a week. The night before they were scheduled to open for a trial run, Michael received a call from Thomas. "We need to talk," his former partner said, voice tight. "Now." They met at a coffee shop halfway between the clinic and the rest care offices. Thomas looked exhausted, his usually immaculate appearance slightly rumpled. "Metasphere is threatening to sue," he said without preamble. "They're claiming breach of contract even though we never finalized the deal." Michael frowned. "On what grounds?" "They're saying we shared proprietary information during negotiations that they acted upon. They invested in infrastructure based on assurances from us." Thomas leaned forward. "But that's not the real issue. They're coming after you personally." "Me, why, Marneman?" "Because you're opening a competing healthcare facility." Michael scoffed. Eleanor House is hardly competition for a multi-billion-dollar healthcare conglomerate. It's not about the competition, Thomas explained. It's about the story. A former Rest Care CEO turns against AI diagnostics to open a human-centered clinic. It's terrible PR for them, makes their whole approach look heartless. What are they asking for? Thomas slid a document across the table. Injunction against the opening of Eleanor House. $3 million in damages. And a public statement from you affirming the value of AI diagnostic platforms in modern healthcare. Michael stared at the paper. This is ridiculous. It's business, Thomas corrected. And they have the legal team to make it stick at least long enough to bleed you dry with legal fees and delay your opening indefinitely. What do you suggest? Thomas hesitated. The board wants to settle, offer them a licensing deal for our older platform at a reduced rate, but they'd need you to sign off on the non-compete clause, which would prevent me from opening Eleanor House. Yes, Michael pushed the document back. Not happening. Michael, be reasonable. They can tie this up in court for years. Then let them try. Thomas sighed. I thought you might say that. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out another folder. That's why I brought this. Michael opened it. Inside was a legal brief prepared by Rest Care's attorneys arguing that Eleanor House fell outside the scope of any reasonable non-compete because it served a different market segment and used no proprietary technology. You're helping me fight this, Michael asked, surprised. Thomas shrugged. I still think you're crazy, but I respect your conviction. He tapped the folder. Besides, if Metasphere can block a small community clinic through legal bullying, what's to stop them from coming after other innovators? Bad precedent. Michael studied his former partner. Why the change of heart? I visited your clinic last week, saw what you're building, saw the veterans working there, the nurses volunteering. Thomas looked away. My father was a GP in a small town. Made house calls until the day he died. He would have approved of Eleanor House. They talked for another hour, strategizing. By the time they parted, they had a plan to counter Metasphere's legal maneuvers. Thank you, Michael said as they stood to leave. Oh, Thomas nodded. Don't make me regret this. I won't. When Michael returned to the clinic, he found Sarah organizing supplies in what would become the triage area. Emma sat nearby, carefully folding patient information pamphlets. We have a problem, he said, explaining the legal threat. Sarah's face fell. So we can't open. I didn't say that. Michael smiled. We're opening tomorrow as planned, and we're going to fight this together. How? With better lawyers than they expected and a story they can't afford to be on the wrong side of. He gestured around the clinic. This place isn't just about healthcare. It's about community. And I'm betting Metasphere doesn't want to be known as the corporation that shut down a neighborhood clinic staffed by veterans and serving the uninsured. Sarah studied him. You're enjoying this, aren't you? The chance to use corporate tactics against corporate bullies. Michael grinned. Maybe a little. She shook her head, but she was smiling too. Just when I think I have you figured out. Keep trying, he said softly. I'm worth the effort. Eleanor House opened the next morning, despite the legal threats. A modest sign hung above the door, freshly painted in forest green with gold lettering. Inside, everything gleamed with the particular shine of things that have been thoroughly cleaned but aren't new. Sarah stood behind the reception desk wearing scrubs for the first time in nearly a year. They were new Michael's doing, but she'd washed them 3 times to make them feel broken in. The staff was small but determined. 3 volunteer nurses, Walter coordinating intake 2 medical students from the nearby university doing clinical hours, and Michael, who had spent the last week brushing up on his general practice skills. Remember? Sarah told them all during the brief staff meeting before they opened the doors. We're not just treating symptoms. We're treating people who have been told they don't matter. Every interaction counts. At 9:00 a.m., Walter unlocked the front door. For the first 20 minutes, no one came. Sarah tried not to look disappointed, but her eyes kept drifting to the empty waiting room. Then the door opened. An elderly woman entered slowly, clutching a handwritten note. My neighbor said you might help, she said, voice quavering. I can't afford my blood pressure medicine this month. Walter stepped forward, taking her gently by the arm. You've come to the right place, ma'am. Let's get you checked in. By noon, the waiting room held a dozen people. A mother with 2 feverish children, An uninsured restaurant worker with a badly cut hand, a homeless man with an infected foot wound, a pregnant teenager afraid to tell her parents. Michael moved from room to room, examining, diagnosing, treating what he could, arranging referrals for what he couldn't. It felt like coming home to a place he'd never been before. During a brief lull, he found Sarah in the supply closet reorganizing bandages. "How are you holding up?" he asked. She turned eyes bright. "I'd forgotten what it feels like. To help without all the paperwork and protocols getting in the way. To actually see people improve because of something you did." He nodded. "It's addictive. In the best way." She stepped closer. "Thank you for this, for remembering what healthcare should be." "Don't thank me yet," he said. "We still have the lawsuit hanging over us." "I'm not worried." "No," she shook her head, "because I've seen what happens when you decide something matters. The world just has to get out of your way." The afternoon brought more patients and with them unexpected visitors. A news crew from the local station arrived, having heard about the AI Executives Community Clinic. "We're not doing interviews," Michael told them firmly. But the reporter was persistent. "Metasphere is threatening to shut you down. The public should know why a former healthcare tech CEO is now fighting against the very industry he helped build." Michael hesitated, looking to Sarah for guidance. She nodded slightly. "5 minutes," he agreed. "But we film while we work. These people need care more than I need a platform." The resulting story aired that evening, Michael in scrubs treating patients alongside Sarah and the volunteer nurses. Walter explaining how the veterans had rebuilt the clinic, Emma showing off the children's reading corner she'd helped design. The reporter's voiceover was simple but powerful. In an era of healthcare driven by algorithms and profit margins, Eleanor House represents a return to medicine's roots, care provided by humans for humans with dignity at its core. The phone started ringing the next morning and didn't stop. Patients seeking appointments, nurses offering to volunteer, medical supply companies willing to donate equipment, and most surprisingly, 3 different law firms offering pro bono services to fight Metasphere's lawsuit. A week later, Metasphere withdrew their legal challenge with a terse statement about focusing on core business objectives. Thomas called with the news. "You won," he said simply. "We all did," Michael replied. The financial reality of running Eleanor House proved more challenging than the legal battle. Grant applications were submitted, rejected, resubmitted. Michael contributed his personal funds, but was careful to maintain the clinic's independence. "This can't be just my project," he insisted during a staff meeting. "It has to be sustainable beyond my involvement." Sarah agreed, but practical concerns mounted. Medical supplies were expensive. The building needed constant maintenance. Volunteer commitments fluctuated. 3 months after opening, they faced their first real crisis. A major grant application was denied, leaving them with just 6 weeks of operating funds. Michael found Sarah in the break room after hours surrounded by spreadsheets, her face drawn with exhaustion. "We can't make payroll next month," she said without looking up. "Even with just the 2 part-time positions." He sat across from her. "I could..." "No," she cut him off. "We agreed. Your personal funds are the last resort. We need to be viable on our own. Then we need to get creative." They spent the night brainstorming. By morning, they had a plan, a hybrid funding model that combined traditional grants with a new partnership program. Local businesses could sponsor specific services, receiving tax benefits and community goodwill in return. Walter enlisted his veteran network to approach business owners. Sarah reached out to former hospital colleagues now working in administration. Michael leveraged his remaining corporate connections. Slowly, sponsors emerged. A local pharmacy agreed to subsidize the medication assistance program. A restaurant chain funded the prenatal nutrition classes. A tech startup provided electronic medical record software at no cost. But the true turning point came from an unexpected source. Thomas arrived one afternoon accompanied by the Rest Care Board chairwoman. "We've been watching what you're doing here," she said, surveying the busy waiting room. "It's impressive." Michael tensed. "Thank you." Rest Care's new direction includes a community outreach initiative, she continued. "We'd like Eleanor House to be our pilot partner." Sarah stepped forward. "What exactly does that mean?" "Financial support, certainly," the chairwoman explained, "but more importantly, access to our diagnostic platforms modified to supplement your care model, not replace it." "Why the change of heart?" Michael asked. Thomas answered, "The data. Patient outcomes here are exceptional despite limited resources. We want to understand why." "Because we treat the whole person," Sarah said simply, "not just the disease." "Precisely." The chairwoman nodded. "And we want to learn how to incorporate that approach into our technology." The resulting partnership transformed Eleanor House's financial outlook. Rescare provided funding with minimal strings attached, while their technical team collaborated with the clinic staff to develop hybrid care models that combined AI efficiency with human touch. 6 months after opening, Eleanor House was serving over 500 patients a month. The staff had grown to include 5 part-time nurses, a social worker, and a psychiatric nurse practitioner. The waiting list for appointments stretched to 3 weeks. One evening, as Michael locked up the clinic, he found Walter sitting on the front steps watching the sunset. "Never thought I'd see this place full of life again," the old veteran said. "Figured it would be torn down, turned into condos or something." Michael sat beside him. "It could have been." "What made you do it, really?" Michael considered the question. "I built a company that helped a lot of people at a distance, but I forgot what it meant to help someone up close." He paused. "When I saw Sarah and Emma that night, it wasn't pity I felt. It was recognition of what I'd lost, of what we all lose when we forget we're connected." Walter nodded slowly. "In Nam, we had a saying, the only way out is through, and the only way through is together." He patted Michael's shoulder. "You're a good man, Doc. Took you a while to remember it, but you got there." Michael smiled. "With a little help." It snowed the morning Eleanor House celebrated its 1-year anniversary. Not the angry, slanting kind that buries sidewalks and silences cities, but the soft kind. The kind that seemed to bless the rooftops with quiet. The kind that made things feel new again. Sarah stood in front of the building's freshly painted door, a wreath made of dried lavender and pine hanging above the frame. Inside, volunteers buzzed like quiet bees, setting out folding chairs, aligning pamphlets, adjusting coffee carafes. "You ready?" Michael asked behind, her voice lower than usual. She didn't answer right away, just kept looking at the words on the glass. "Eleanor House, a place for healing, a place to begin." Sarah turned slowly, eyes tracing over Michael's coat dusted in snow. "Do you ever worry we dream too big?" He shook his head. "Not once." "Even now?" He stepped beside her, his breath visible in the air. "Especially now." Sarah exhaled the fog of it, mingling with his. Inside, Emma raced from room to room with a basket of ribbon-tied cards she'd made for the guests. "You matter. You are not alone. Come in. Stay warm." Her pink boots left little melted prints across the tile, but no one scolded her. Martha was already inside too, hunched over the refreshment table, arranging thermoses like precious antiques. She spotted Sarah through the window and gave a little nod, like they were soldiers holding the line. The doors opened at 900 a.m. sharp. People trickled in slowly at first. Mothers with children in tow. Elderly women in wool coats too thin for the cold. A man holding a handwritten note from a shelter worker that simply read, "Please help him." Sarah greeted each one by name when she could, and when she couldn't, she greeted them by the look in their eyes. "I'm Sarah," she said. "Welcome home." By mid-morning, the waiting room was full. Soft music played from a small Bluetooth speaker someone had donated. Volunteers poured coffee, helped with paperwork, distributed gloves and scarves. One of the former nurses from Sarah's old hospital had shown up unexpectedly asking to volunteer. Another brought food. By noon, they had to turn people away. Not because there wasn't room, but because they hadn't expected so many to believe so soon. Sarah stood in the hallway outside the exam room, her chest rising and falling like she'd run miles. Michael approached slowly, watching her closely. "You okay?" She looked at him, eyes wide, overwhelmed. "It's working." He smiled. "Of course it is." Sarah pressed her back to the wall. "We're going to need more chairs." "We'll find them, and more staff and funding." Michael reached out, placing a hand gently over hers. "We'll figure it out one step at a time." She nodded slowly, but her eyes filled again, not from panic, from release. "I didn't think we'd get here," she whispered. "I always did," he said. "But I never imagined it would feel like this." "Like what?" "Like watching something bloom in winter." The front door opened again. Sarah turned instinctively, but it wasn't a patient. It was Thomas. He walked in with careful steps, dressed in a dark coat, a folder tucked under one arm. His expression was unreadable. Sarah straightened. Michael stepped forward, guarded but calm. "You didn't call," Michael said. Thomas looked around slowly, taking it all in. The modest setup, the homemade signs, the line of guests waiting patiently for warmth and dignity. "I wanted to see it with my own eyes," Thomas said, "before I decided how I felt." Sarah stood still, chin high, clipboard clutched to her chest. Thomas looked at her, then back at Michael. "You tanked our biggest contract to help build this." "Yes," Michael said. Thomas looked down at the floor, then back up. "Good," he said. Sarah blinked. "What?" "I was angry," Thomas said. "Still am in some ways. But seeing this, the way people walked in here, like it meant something just to be invited in." He paused. "I get it now." Sarah didn't relax, but something inside her softened. Thomas stepped forward and handed Michael the folder. "A friend of mine runs a clinic in Evanston. She's got extra exam tables and 2 part-time nurses. Says she's tired of red tape, might want a partner." Michael took it surprise. "You're serious?" "Don't make me repeat myself," Thomas muttered, then added quieter, "Good luck, both of you." He turned to go. At the door he paused. "Eleanor House, huh?" Sarah smiled faintly. "It's named after my mother." Thomas nodded once, then, "It's in the right hands." He left before she could reply. The sun broke through the clouds mid-afternoon, sending gold streaks across the icy pavement. Inside, Sarah sat with a woman named Josephine, who hadn't seen a doctor in 3 years. Michael helped Emma pass out water bottles and fruit cups. Martha taught a man how to stitch a torn glove using a needle from the supply closet. And for the first time, the word clinic didn't feel cold. Sarah sat behind the intake desk watching it all unfold. Her heart ached in that quiet, beautiful way it does when something good is finally real. She looked at Michael across the room, kneeling beside a child in a wheelchair, laughing at something the boy said. He glanced up and their eyes met. No words passed. They didn't need to, because this was the promise, and it was being kept. 1 year later, the snow fell again. The same kind of gentle, drifting snow that had once blanketed a bus stop bench and changed the direction of 2 lives forever. But this time it didn't feel like survival weather. It felt like something softer, like grace. Inside Eleanor House, the warmth pulsed not just from the radiators, but from the steady rhythm of lives quietly rebuilding. The front lobby smelled like peppermint tea and fresh bread. Sarah moved through the space with quiet purpose, clipboard in hand, a half-finished cup of coffee cooling on the desk behind her. Her badge, simple white no-title clipped to her sweater, read just Sarah. That's how she wanted it. She peeked into exam room 2, where a mother sat with her teenage son, smiling for the first time since they'd arrived last week. Room 3 held a young couple navigating prenatal care with the help of a volunteer nurse Sarah had trained herself. The center buzzed with motion and meaning. A woman brushed past Sarah in the hallway, pausing briefly. "You remembered my name," the woman said softly, her voice catching. Sarah placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "That's because it matters." The woman nodded and walked on. Sarah turned the corner and found Emma in the community room with 2 other children, all of them folding construction paper into lopsided hearts. She was taller now, more confident, her hair pulled back in a red ribbon, her laugh easy and loud. "Almost ready?" Sarah asked. Emma held up a card that read, "You belong here," in purple crayon. "Almost." Michael's voice echoed softly down the hallway. "Everything's set up outside. You're not going to believe how many people showed up." Sarah turned. He leaned against the door frame in his black coat sleeves, pushed-up gloves in one hand, cheeks still pink from the cold. His smile was quieter now, deeper somehow. Earned. She walked over and adjusted his scarf. "You're terrible at wrapping this." "That's why I keep you around," he said. She gave him a look. "Really?" "Well, that and the fact that you run this place better than I ever could." She smirked. "Don't you forget it." He leaned closer, voice lower. "Never." Outside, a small crowd had gathered for the 2-year celebration. Nothing flashy, no press, no podiums, just a community meal, donated scarves, music from a local trio playing acoustic covers on borrowed speakers. Former patients handed out cider. Volunteers danced with toddlers on the sidewalk. Thomas even brought extra folding chairs and actual hot chocolate this time. Walter supervised it all, leaning on his cane, directing his veteran crew like a seasoned general. Sarah stepped outside and paused, watching it all unfold. The wind tousled her hair. She pulled her coat tighter but didn't move, didn't speak. She just stood in the center of it all, watching a dream she never dared name come fully alive. Michael joined her, slipping his hand into hers without a word. "You remember what I looked like the first night you saw me?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes. I didn't even have socks on, just those hospital shoes with the holes." "I remember." She looked up at him. "And now," he turned toward her, "now you wear hope like it's stitched into your skin." Sarah's eyes welled, but she didn't look away. "I still have hard days. We all do. Some mornings I wake up and wonder when it's all going to collapse." Michael reached up, brushing a curl from her cheek. "Then we rebuild again. And again if we have to." She leaned into his shoulder, her voice quiet. "You didn't rescue me." "I know. You remembered me," she said, "when I had nothing left to offer. You made me want to remember myself," he whispered. The snow thickened, coating the sidewalks like a fresh canvas. Children stomped in it with squeals of delight. A teenage boy wrapped a scarf around his younger sister and gave her the last muffin from his plate. Martha poured another cup of cider and handed it to a man she used to scold for showing up late. From somewhere deep in the crowd, Walter's veteran choir began to sing. No microphone, no instruments, just voices. Soft, strong belonging. Sarah looked up at the building, its windows glowing golden against the gray sky. "I wish my mother could see this," she said. "She does," Michael replied. And somehow Sarah believed that. Later, after the celebration wound down and families trickled back into the warmth of the center, Sarah and Michael stood alone in the courtyard. Emma lay curled on a bench beside them, fast asleep under a borrowed quilt. The snow had stopped. Sarah looked up at the sky stars peeking through. She took a breath like she hadn't taken in years, full without apology. "I used to think surviving was the most I could ask for," she said. Michael brushed his fingers gently against hers. Now I know love can grow in the wreckage," she said. "Not in spite of it, but because of it." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, slow and still. "Then let's keep growing." Sarah smiled. They stood there quiet beneath the stars, three hearts wrapped in a future that hadn't been promised, only chosen. And when Sarah finally whispered, "We're home," she wasn't speaking to Michael. She was speaking to every part of herself that had once gone silent and now had found its voice. They say true change arrives unannounced, wrapped in ordinary moments: a stranger at a bus stop, a coat offered without expectation, a child's drawing of a family that doesn't yet exist. The journey from that snowy bench to Eleanor House wasn't measured in miles, but in barriers broken and truths faced in the quiet courage it takes to begin again. Michael Reynolds lost a fortune but found his purpose. Sarah Mitchell surrendered her pride but reclaimed her dignity. And somewhere between desperation and healing, they discovered what the wealthy and the homeless share: the universal human need to be seen, to matter, to belong. The building on Parkview wasn't just a clinic. It became a testament to what happens when we value connection over commerce, when we remember that medicine isn't just about extending life, but about making it worth living. Some called it foolish idealism. Others called it necessary humanity. In the end, perhaps the most profound healing wasn't found in diagnoses or prescriptions, but in the simple recognition that we are all at some point broken, and that our fractures are where the light gets in. What would our world look like if we all stopped walking past each other's pain and instead walked toward it?